Welcome to Behind the Lava Lava, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the vibrant people and cultures of the Pacific. I'm your host, Michael Tan, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Milford Tiafala. This episode is brought to you by Matai Watches, a luxury timepiece brand that embodies the essence of the Pacific Islands. We'll be kicking it with Jake Thomas, a fellow Marine veteran and creator of Keep Walking on social media. So Jake, can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Jake Thomas. Like you said, I'm also a Marine veteran, did 8 years in the Marine Corps Infantry. Got out, got a job with the Department of Energy, and I live in Amarillo, Texas, and started the platform Keep Walking.
So I like to start off our conversations with an icebreaker question. And today's icebreaker question is, what would you do if you notice that there is no toilet paper while using a public toilet?
That's what socks are for, right? You got two of them. You'll be good with one.
So I've been in a situation when I was in the military. I've used my underwear. So that was the only solution that I could come up with, especially if it's a public stall and there's nothing in that stall. So what else can you use but your underwear? What about you, Jake?
I think I'd go with shirt sleeve. I mean, you just take them both off. Maybe you're just trying to get some sun on your arms, you know?
So let's think of some creative ways. What else can we use? Let's say we were like something random was in the bathroom. What would we use?
I mean, I guess you could use an empty toilet paper roll. It wouldn't be very forgiving, but you could get after it.
I know back in the day in the Pacific Islands, back in Samoa, I'm pretty sure there were a lot of leaves around back in the outhouses. So I'll be using the leaves. What about you, T?
There's paper towels. Just wet them. Wet whatever you got in there. I don't know, man. Just use what you can.
Let's get straight into it. So, Jake, can you tell us about your genesis, where you're from, where you were born, and where you grew up?
Yeah, absolutely. I was born in San Diego, California, in the old Balboa Hospital. My dad was in the Navy. Growing up, we bounced around a lot. So Southern California up to the Pacific Northwest into Washington, and then kind of all over the place. So I was a Navy brat and ended up in Washington, which is where I joined the Marine Corps, and that kind of was the catalyst to where I am today.
What about your parents, and how many siblings did you have?
So my parents are both from northern Utah, just north of Ogden, a farming town there called Tremonton. I have an older sister. Unfortunately, we've been estranged for many years, but I like to say, just because my wife's family being what it is, I picked up 7 siblings when I married her, and they're my family. So I got a lot of brothers now and a lot of sisters. So I'm super excited that I have those relationships.
Because I know you were in the Marine Corps. Did you join the Marine Corps right after high school, or was there a period where you worked or went to college before you joined?
No, I went straight in. Like, I at least had a little bit of awareness that if I went to college, I wasn't going to go very far. Like, I'd have been getting in trouble or partying or whatever. Like, I wasn't focused. And so my big thing was I was going to join the Marine Corps to get away from my dad's rules. And he just laughed at me and was like, okay, have at it.
Other than your dad's rules, was there another reason for you to join the Marine Corps?
Initially, I was going to join the Army. And they were kind of like, you know, give me the runaround and, oh, we need this. And wait, this isn't going to actually happen the way it's supposed to. I mean, we all know the game, how the recruiters play the game. So went across the office to the Marine Corps and was like, hey, this is what's going on. Can I join? And he was like, sure. So I got to watch those two argue with each other. And he came back with my jacket and, you know, that was that. But I think for me, I was just looking to get out of town, right? Like, I knew college wasn't going to be a thing for me. And I was tired of just the drama of high school, tired of people who were just real shallow and superficial. And so I was ready to get out.
Were you a troublemaker as a youngin' growing up? What kind of stuff did you get into?
Absolutely, I was. A lot of it, you know, I was a good kid for the most part. I mean, I was rambunctious and I'd get into it. You know, I'm very much that hard-headed personality. Like, you can tell me, hey, the stove's hot, don't touch it, and I'm still going to touch it because I don't believe you. You know, it won't be hot for me type thing. But from like mid-teens all the way up until probably 19 or 20 years old. Like I grew up in a real religious family, and because I realize now in retrospect that I was living kind of on borrowed light, like it just wasn't for me. And so I took the approach of, well, whatever they're telling me to do, I'm going to go to the complete opposite. So drinking, weed, hanging out, the whole thing, and just, that was my approach. And so that was another reason I wanted to leave. I was tired of being under somebody else's thumb, and I figured that would be the freedom that I was looking for, which in some ways it was, in other ways it definitely was not.
And when did you join the Marine Corps?
I joined in 99 in the delayed entry program, and then went to boot camp right after like high school graduation. In fact, I turned 18 like 3 days in.
How was your experience back in 99 when you first joined? What was the big differences from when you joined and from 1999 to like the 2000s?
So first, we were a peacetime Marine Corps. And so we obviously had, combat vets in our ranks, guys that had been some places. Biggest, conflicts we'd had up until that point were, Mogadishu and Desert Storm. A couple of odd deployments here and there for guys who may be in, recon or whatever. But it was largely peacetime. And so it was interesting to go from a peacetime boot camp, and obviously these guys are trying to square us away and do those things. And I remember a couple days into like receiving, when I was on fire watch, and this, the DI come up and he was, hey, where's the other fire watch? And me being a stupid kid, I'm a position of attention, and I nod my head and go, oh, he's over here. And that DI grabbed my cover and like twisted the bill of it and like jammed me against the wall. And he's like, if you ever lose your bearing and discipline like that again, I'll end your life. And I'm just like, what did I get myself into? And then, go through training, end up in England for one of my first duty stations, and then 9/11 happened. And we all knew at that point we're going to war in some type of capacity. So it definitely shifted after that.
So I have a question for both of you. So in boot camp, what memory or shenanigans stood out to you guys? So for me, I remember an incident when everyone went to bed, right? And suddenly I was awoken by a few recruits running down to like 2 bunk beds down. It was the first time that I've heard of this thing where they get one of those sheets, they hold down someone, like each recruit gets one of the corners of the sheets and hold down whoever their target was, and then they get the sock with the soap in it, and then they just went, hit whoever the recruit they were targeting with. So that incident occurred when I was in. So the recruits went haywire on this recruit they were targeting, and the recruit they were targeting happened to be, quote unquote, the weakest recruit in the platoon. So they went and beat him up, and then the next morning those involved were in trouble and sit back a few like companies behind us. So that was my experience of the shenanigans that went on when I was a recruit. What about you guys?
Not really shenanigans, but just, middle of the night, taking a dookie, and then the DI comes, the first night comes and grabs me off the toilet. A little Chamorro guy too. I thought he was going to be cool. What are you doing? Like, oh, using the bathroom. And then I don't give a F. And then he just grabs me, and I was like, man. I go back, and you got those skid marks just hanging out the next day, and of course they got the tornado going on. So somebody else got blessed with those. Yeah, that's just one of the memories. I was older when I went in. I was like 21, 22, so I kind of flew under the radar as much as I could.
A big one for me, like I still reflect and just laugh of like how creative the DIs would be with just, the things they would say, they would know when they were being like funny and just trying to get dudes to break, right? So then they could just have more games to play. And so I remember one time the DI came out and he was like, hey, recruit so-and-so, come to the quarter deck, bring this. And he was very specific, bring this and this. And he showed up with like completely 2 foreign things, and he was looking at them all stupid like, oh, okay, you guys must have lost your minds. And so collectively as a company, we got to crawl around on our hands and knees for hours looking for this recruit's mind. Because if he lost his mind, then we clearly did too. And I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. And I just can't help but laugh, you know? And so I just think it's about the games that we're all well aware of. You know, I still crack up because I'm like, okay, you come up with that on the fly and you made like 100 kids crawl around looking for nothing.
So one experience that I had was it was close to going to bed, right? And one of the drill instructors told me to get in my pillowcase. And you know how small the pillowcases were, right? And the whole time I was going, aye, sir, aye, sir. Well, I was trying to fit my whole body inside this pillowcase. So that was very traumatic for me. At the time I was 17. I turned 18 when I was in training. But this 17-year-old kid being told to do something that was totally uncomfortable, and, you know, it's way out of, you know, it was totally different for me. But Jake, how would you rate your overall experience as a Marine? How many years did you serve?
I did 8 years. I think overall, I was a good Marine. Right? I can reflect on that. Like, stayed out of trouble. A lot of that's because I didn't get caught, but, you know, stayed out of trouble. But even in the Marine Corps, like, especially in the infantry, like, there is a pack mentality there. Like, it's very, very tribal. Even from, like, platoon to platoon, squad to squad. And so, like, my approach to people in the Marine Corps, especially because I tried to pay attention to the guys who were senior to me and, like, listen to what feedback they would give. And recognizing, like, being a squad leader as an example, like, I may have to ask these dudes to, like, sacrifice their life. And so I never wanted to, like, belittle or, like, treat these dudes less than human. Like, I would hold people accountable, right? I would definitely stay in that space. But I didn't go out of my way to mess with people like how we've seen NCOs and, you know, just Marines try to be that tough guy. And because I took that approach, a lot of times I'd catch heat for it. Like, I'd get made fun of, or, like, my peer group would try to, like, you know, make comment or whatever. But my career, I thought, was really good. A struggle for me, though, was when I had applied for the job that I'm currently doing. You know, I was waiting for word, and it finally came back. And I was actually out there in 29 Palms, and I was with 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines getting ready to deploy. And, you know, I come back to the first sergeant and said, hey, you know, this job I applied for came through, you know, won't start till X, so I'd like to still deploy with the company. Just need to come back early and do terminal. And he was like, well, you can either extend for a year or we're going to FAP you out. And I was like, first sergeant, like, I want to go. Like, I'm not saying I'm trying to get out of deployment. Just let me come back. And he's like, no, here's your choices. So I'm like, well, I guess you have to FAP me out then. And it was like, it crushed me, dudes, because, like, I had prided myself in being a good Marine, always trying to, like, excel and do all the things. And as soon as I told him I wasn't going to play ball, I was FAP'd out to the freaking hobby shop on base, like, the next week. And it like I went into a depression because I had identified and, like, created this personality around being a Marine that when it was no longer me being a Marine, like, I didn't know what to do with myself. It was really hard. And so that was kind of the way I got out. You know, it was the longest I've ever been home with my family in the Marine Corps because I was at the gym and at the base hobby shop, but it was just a weird space to be in.
And what was your MOS again?
0311 infantry.
And where have you been deployed to?
I went to Iraq for the initial invasion. So when we crossed the line in 2003, our battalion was the last infantry battalion to not rotate back. So we were supposed to be there, you know, the 6 to 8 months like everybody else, and we ended up staying closer to a year.
So I haven't been deployed during my time in. I did 5 years. I was a Marine in the air wing. So I was a 6322. I was fixing helicopters as an avionics man. So most of my time I did sea deployments. So I've been throughout Asia. I have no experience or know nothing about the deployments, especially for you guys who have been deployed to the desert in the Middle East. How was your experience being deployed there?
So mine was wild because it was literally, hey, go to Kuwait, see what happens, hope they stop acting the fool, maybe we'll come home. And then it was very quickly decided that's not going to happen. So we crossed the line March 19th, and our unit took the Ramallah oil fields. So for anybody who claims that the war was nothing for oil, like I was there, we didn't start filling up trucks of oil and sending it back to the States. So I don't know what we did with it, but I'm not sure that's what we did. And then we just kept pushing. It was a lot of, drive here, get out, do some work. We took Al Kut, which is south of Baghdad, crossed into Baghdad over the Euphrates, got in some good gunfights there, took Baghdad University, stayed there for a while. And then when the war was air fingers over, we went into security and stability operations. And so they started throwing everybody all around the country to basically be, local police forces, hold the continuity of the country down so it didn't go haywire like during the invasion. So I was in An-Najah for a while, which is where Muqtada al-Sadr and his homies like to hang out and cause trouble. And then spent some time in Babylon. And then we pumped from Babylon back to Najaf and then came home. So I was all over the place, but it was wild, wild west. I mean, our ROEs were, if you're 16 or older and you're out after a certain time, you're up to no good, and you were basically cleared hot to be engaged. So there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of need, even in hindsight, to be very, very aware of what we were doing before we just started, letting it rip to somebody on the other end who maybe out walking their dog, you know what I mean? But it was very chaotic, very, very stressful, a lot of sleep deprivation, just constant go, 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 go.
During these early deployments, was there anything from your upbringing or anything that you could call back to, throughout all your life experience up to this point that kind of helped you during this time? Because, you're there during the very early times, not a lot of preparation in terms of, I guess you infantry with the stress inoculation and being able to deal with things and adapting. Of course, there's that end, but was there anything like when all the adrenaline from all the firefights and all that stress has died down, was there anything you think from your life experience that helped you kind of deal with being out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Ironically, the thing that I had run from for so long in my life, namely about knowing my relationship with my creator, my faith, it came full circle before I left. I transferred back to the States and I was like, what I've been doing was not serving me. And so I had made a decision, hey, it's time for me to get right with God, whatever that looked like. And, in that process, I met my future wife, started really getting focused back into those things. And so like when things got real hard, when we lost people, when the uncertainty of the op tempo and, hey, you guys done such a good job, so instead of sending you home, we're going to make you stay longer, true Marine Corps fashion. The uncertainty of what's going on back home, the infrequent, calls and letters, like I really leaned heavy in those spaces of faith because, other than that, the only thing I really had was the guy to the left and right of me. And so that was a very, very strong focal point for me during that time.
How would you say your time in the Marine Corps was like? Was it a waste of time, or did you feel like you had a greater purpose or you had meaning during your time served? Because for me, if it hadn't been for humanitarian aid missions, I think my time in the Marine Corps would have been a waste. Just like working in a government job, like things are repetitive and you feel like you have no purpose or no mission. That's why I'm glad for my time in the Marine Corps, but that's how I feel. If it wasn't for humanitarian aids, it would have been a waste. How do you feel about it?
So that's something I've actually struggled with here even recently. Like I thought I'd done a decent job of kind of processing and, reflecting back on my time and going, the people we lost or the guys who came home different or broken, like that cost was worth what we saw, right? The country was attempting to utilize democracy in whatever fashion they could interpret it. and we were making headway with, removing the terrorist groups that were trying to fill the vacuum of power when Saddam was taken out. And then we all know politics are politics. And it was just like, it was really hard for me to see these areas that we had fought so hard to take given back, without any checks or balances to maintain that the people who were in them were going to, one, be taken care of, and the people that had chewed that dirt hadn't done it in vain. So when Ramadi was given back, when Baghdad was given back, but it wasn't given back to a group who was ready to help the people, and ready to have that country grow. It was basically the same thugs in different clothes. And so I thought I made peace with that. And then, January 6th happens, and I'm going, what is happening to my country right now? I became very jaded for a while, because it was just like, was this all a lie? Like, was this all just, did I get played? Did me and my friends get played, and we get to watch this all happen? I'm like, so there's a lot of self-reflection and a lot of questions in those spaces, because I really thought that I had made an impact. And looking back, I can say I did. I mean, I can think of interactions with, people that I had overseas in Iraq, little kids, who were just, they were stuck in a bad spot. They didn't choose to be there, other than that's where they lived. And, I'm able to have those interactions. And I'm hopeful that they're doing well, wherever they may be. But there was definitely this dichotomy of like thinking I'd made a huge difference and then seeing things unfold a way that I didn't expect, which caused a lot of questions. And I think the only thing that really helps me to stay grounded in those spaces is like the freedom we enjoy in this country, no matter what, side of the aisle or whatever you think, like that freedom is there for everybody to use however they see fit, and not for us to decide we'll only use it in these spaces, right? And so that kind of helped me to just kind of even out and like, okay, like this has nothing to do with me, and that's okay.
How about you, T? Did you feel like your time in the Marine Corps was a waste, or did you feel like you had purpose or meaning to it?
More than anything, for me and my hardcore pogue life that I lived, I'm grateful that it gave me a job, got me out of whatever ridiculousness I was into at the time as a young fella. The relationships are the best, it gave a lot of us crazy people a home, a lot of us who didn't know what we wanted to do, what the future held. But, the saddest part is those who didn't know what to do afterwards, or at least seeing, the landscape of the Marine Corps change in front of them, having a hard time in adapting to whatever. I feel bad for those people. I wish I'm fortunate to have the kind of just roll with the punches, go with the flow type of mentality that I do. But just seeing people that we used to know kind of just change and disappear or not be the same anymore, that's the hardest thing. But I mean, no matter what I did or didn't do, I got to be appreciative of the experience I got during those years. If you're in the firearms, gear, or the tactical world, you need to check out R&R Tactical. They're not just a store, they're a destination for enthusiasts, and they offer an incredible range of products. From firearms and ammunition to the latest accessories, they've got it all. But here's what sets them apart: custom guns. These aren't just firearms, they're pieces of art tailored to your preferences. It's like having your dream gun in your hands. And it doesn't stop there. R&R Tactical offers top-notch gunsmithing services, repairs, and expert advice to keep your firearms performing at their best. At R&R Tactical, they blend their knowledge and expertise to provide top-quality products, competitive prices, and invaluable information, all wrapped up in exceptional customer service. So if you're in Utah or planning to visit, make R&R Tactical your go-to spot for all things tactical. Check them out and tell them we sent you. Connect with R&R Tactical, a veteran-owned business at 1657 North Guardian Drive, Saratoga Springs, Utah 84045. Call them at 801-915-1108. That's 801-915-1108.
So, Jake, you're into social media, and I see that you're the creator of Keep Walking. Could you elaborate more on that, on your role on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I'm part of a mastermind, and we had met in Dallas, and in that group, I had left that week with some action items because I know where I want to go in the future. I definitely have an idea and my why, but I didn't really have a lot of anything to show for it. And we've all heard people talk about you want to be about it, but are you actually gonna talk about it or be about it? And so one of the action items, one of the guys challenged me was, hey, I want you to create content every day. He's like, could you change my life? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely I could. That's how strongly I feel about this. He's like, okay, do it. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I want you to change my life. He's like, come up with something. I want you to think about it, be authentic, something that really resonates with you, and just create every day. He's like, and if you do this, I'll be your biggest fan. He's like, but if you don't, I'll never work with you again. And I was just like, wow, it's like that? Like, okay. And so I'm like, got it. Gonna work for it. So Keep Walking was born out of that. And the reason behind Keep Walking, it's multi-layered, but the biggest thing is to motivate and inspire people. I think about the time in the Marine Corps when we've been on those humps. You're carrying all the gear, all the kit, you're walking through the sand, up and down hills, whatever, right? And you're 3 miles into 10 miles, and you got a long way to go. And you start to see people drop. When one drops, another one inevitably drops because he sees, oh, well, he didn't get in trouble. So you just start seeing people drop left and right. And the pack gets bigger in the back, and they're passing gear off and all these things. And I can reflect even in my own life in those times where I'm like, it would be easier to quit. It really would be. And then I just think like, okay, I can take one more step. I can do that. I don't have to run. I don't have to think 10 miles ahead. I can just take one step. And so when I think how that translates into like everyday life, like all of us can relate with, there's days that are hard. There's days where it's like, I can't even get out of bed. And so my encouragement to people on my page and on my platform is just keep walking. Just take one step. And if you can't walk, crawl. Just do whatever you have to do. Just keep pushing a little bit. You don't have to do it and rush and sprint. We can all do one step. And that really ties into normalizing and breaking the stigmas of men in the spaces that society creates for us where, hey, if you talk about the things that bother you, if you have problems or emotions, you're weak. I mean, that permeates so strongly in the Marine Corps and even in the veteran community. And I have a counter message going, you're strongest you can be as a male if you're willing to actually sit in those spaces. And it can be clunky and awkward, and you don't, because it really goes against everything we're taught as men. But it would be like telling somebody, well, hey, ignore your legs. Like you have them, but you don't get to talk about them, but everybody else does. And so that's really where I started, and it's just continued to grow. And so I created a 30-day, content of 30 days and 30 ways to change your life. Each day focusing on gratitude and physical exercise, gratitude and sleep, gratitude and a healthy diet, gratitude in your finances, like whole litany of things, because like I've learned that there's always gratitude around us. And if I can lean into that and look for the gratitude around me, my life immediately can go to abundance. And now all of a sudden I don't feel like I don't have enough time or I don't have enough money or I'm not good enough or all the things we tell ourselves. So that's really the message I'm trying to get across with Keep Walking is like the commonality we share is we can all take one more step. We all have feelings and emotions, and it's okay to have those things.
And since starting Keep Walking and becoming a social media creative, how has that helped you in your life?
It's been fantastic. Like there's an energy in the creative space that I don't think can be touched or like replicated anywhere else but in those spaces. And there's a momentum that is gained. Like I didn't know anything about doing any of this, but I was just like, okay, I committed to doing this, so I'm going to. And just kind of find your rhythm, find your feel, and then things start to be attracted to it. And I approached it from a space of abundance, and that's magnetic. And the energy that came with it, it just became a catalyst for more things and more things. And it's just been a really powerful experience.
Yeah, and I'm glad you found your purpose on social media. So before we we started podcasting, I was doing reels and TikToks. It became a weekly thing for me to the point I was starting to go viral. Like the most views that I've gotten on one video was 2.9 million views. And when I got to that point, I was like, man, I it kind of it was like a drug where you like that high, but then you realize that it wasn't authentic.
Hmm.
So I'm glad that we picked up podcasting because it was more genuine, it was more authentic, and I can actually be myself instead of following the trends of today, instead of doing voiceovers or lip syncing or acting and all that stuff that you do on reels and TikTok. So, T, do you have any questions?
not, not right now, but that's why seeing you like at first I got the friend request from the Keep Walking page on Facebook, and I'm like, what the heck is this? You know, like, he had no content posted yesterday. Thought it was spam, and then I seen who the mutual friends were, and I was like, all right, it might be somebody I know, so I'll wait. And then I seen he started posting content, or at least the algorithm finally allowed me to start seeing videos, 'cause, shadow bans and whatnot, and I was catching the 30 days out of order. So something wrong with my Facebook algorithm. Anyways, now I seen that, and then I heard about him writing a book, and then I'm thinking about, hey, that's exactly the kind of thing we try to cover and talk about here. The title thing called Behind the Lava Lava, and the purpose behind that, and what Jake's trying to accomplish here is very important, especially coming from somebody, like him, who went through the initial push, and someone that people will gravitate towards because he definitely went, when people tend to gravitate towards people who've been through hell and come out on the other side, no matter what type of the hell takes form, people they can relate to those type of things, and they gravitate, and they tend to pay attention and receive the message more openly on that end from them for themselves. And I thought that was very important and cool. And I'm like, man, we got to have Jake on, especially him being, an 03. For those who don't know what 03 is, it's infantry. And no matter which branch I've talked to, what type of infantry, grunts, certain types of grunts, they're some of the most deep intellectual individuals you speak to, the most analytical and philosophical type of people. And it's like, what the heck, you're supposed to just be a, grunt breaking things, but then like you actually hold conversations. Like, man, they definitely, well, they gain experience from having to pass the time out there on patrol and on watch all the time. But I just thought it'd be really cool to have Jay come on and, have him kind of bless us as well, and with his message and what he does, his intent, and his journey.
So one of the things, Jake, that I had been struggling with was my mental health. That was one of the main reasons why our podcast started, was addressing men's mental health, and it became a therapy session for us who are inflicted with mental health illnesses. So depression and anxiety are the two things that always hit me randomly. I remember maybe a couple of years ago, or was it 3 years ago, that I went through a phase where I had suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, and that kind of triggered the whole thing where I went and seek help from a VA therapist. But what got me to the point of seeking the help of a VA therapist was when I was starting to fail my first semester of my third year in college. So how has it been for you? Because you're advocating for men's vulnerability, trying to break that stigma. How has it been for you, especially in terms of mental health?
Initially, when I guess took up this torch, this flag, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions that I had for myself, like very much like, we don't talk about Bruno. Like that whole movie hit in a different way because it's like we all have these things. But when I think about my peers, like it breaks my heart. Like it causes anger in me that I can't count on 2 hands and 2 feet the people I know who've taken their lives since either coming back, or lost overseas. Like the ones who were lost in country, like we can at least rationalize that. Like you can say, hey, war. But just too many, far too many. And so when I think about my mental health, like anybody who says that they go to war and they come back normal, they're lying. Like you were broken before you left. And a lot of the reason why I want to talk about these things and normalize these things is just over the years watching guys either, outright take their lives or do it on the installment plan, whether they're drinking or doing drugs or, go fast, don't die with the motorcycles and the cars and whatever, seeing friends in and out of jail, in and out of rehab. And I just have to get curious. I'm like, what happened? Like, where did it go, south for you? And I just look at the commonality, like, there's not a lot of things in place. Like, I'm glad, Michael, that you were able to go to the VA, and your experience was what it was, because I know a lot of the friends that I have, like, they don't want nothing to do with the VA because, they either want to throw pills at you or, you try to open up and you get a varied response. And I can recognize, people are people. They're trying just like we are. But it's just like it's really hard to be on the outside looking in and just reflecting on my own life. Like I came home and like, we came home, we landed, right? Came back, hit 29 Palms, big fanfare celebration. All the families, all the people were there. We're pumped to be home. And I remember like, my father-in-law's there, mother-in-law, my folks, my wife, Jess. And it's just like this huge high, like, hey, we're back, we made it. And so the family wants to go out, they want to have fun, right? So we're down in Yucca Valley, we're trying to get some food. And I'm sitting there and I remember just looking around me and everybody's having a great time. And I felt like an alien. Like I felt like the furthest person away from like being home that I could think of. And it was just this really surreal like experience. And that kind of started this journey for me of, for a decade plus of knowing that something was off, something was wrong, and not knowing how to fix it. And so I spent many, many years filling holes in myself. And it was everything from, I'm going to go start this new hobby, right? I'm going to go start paintball or woodworking or learn how to fish, or I'm going to start working out. All these things to try to like distract myself from what I knew was there. And it's just like trying to hold a beach ball under the surface in a pool. Like you can do it for a while, but eventually it's going to pop up, and it's going to pop up with force. And it's just been really tough to like recognize, okay, like just because I'm not missing arms and legs doesn't mean that I haven't been impacted. And my family hasn't been impacted. But there's that stigma. I think about the times where in the Marine Corps, I did go to like try to talk somebody. And at that time, if you went to try to get help, they'd pull you out of your unit. And so it's like, so now I want to go get help, but you're going to pull me out of my support group, the dudes that I chewed that dirt with. So a lot of guys just eat it. And so I was like, oh, never going to do that again. And then guys trying to get out and get jobs, and knowing that you can't be discriminated against for your experiences, but seeing people be openly discriminated and not get jobs or be fired from jobs. And so I played this game for a long time of, all right, I'm just going to distract myself. I'm going to find ways to, do my own treatment. And thankfully I didn't go the drug or alcohol route. I didn't go to those spaces, but I did a lot of destructive things and a lot of hurtful things that, like, I'm very lucky that I married the woman that I did, because like she's a G, she's a real one. Because in this attempt to figure out who I was and what was going on in me, the people who love me the most are the ones I tried to avoid. Because I learned here, in this healing process, that don't get close to people because they can die. And so the very people who wanted to help me the most, I was pushing away. And so the mental health thing is like, it's real. And it doesn't have to be from a military experience. I mean, you could be in a car wreck, you could be a victim of sexual assault, domestic violence. there's all kinds of things that can happen, but the commonality I think that we have as humans, as men, is like we're not weak. Like by talking about these things, like, and I would rather, I mean, if you guys follow UFC, Patty, he talked about like his buddy had killed himself, and he was like, I would rather like sit up with you for hours and have you cry on my shoulder and talk about all these things than go to your funeral. I mean, that's just real. Like, because I just think there's, especially coming out of 2 decades of war in Iraq and that and more so in Afghanistan, there's a need. We need to start having these conversations and encouraging each other instead of going, oh, well, I'm not as bad as this guy, and so I just eat it until it turns into something terrible.
Thanks for sharing, Jake. And to our listeners, especially all the men out there, it's never weak to seek help when you are struggling, whether it's from your peers, your friends, or even a therapist. There's a stigma around seeing a counselor or a therapist. It's not what you think. Once you find the right therapist to help you, that's when you'll start improving your mental health, getting the help that you need. It's okay to shop around for the right counselor or therapist just to help you out, because no one wants to see you struggle alone. No one wants to hear that you passed away from a poor choice that you've made, especially when it comes to ending your own life. And just know that there is always someone out there to listen. There's always a ear out there to listen to what you are going through. And if you want someone, there's always behind the lava to reach out to us if you need someone to talk to. So Jake, can you tell us about the book that you're writing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it follows the theme of my social platforms. The title of the book is Keep Walking, a Marine's, journey home from combat. Because it's been one of those experiences that, I crossed the line in 2003. We're looking at 20 years. And I feel like I'm just now able to feel like I'm home again. So it's been a long walk. It's been a very long walk. And so in that book, I definitely talk about my experiences, because experiences shape us. They have to. And so I reflect on the times where, I tried to fill the holes and all the things, and just the insights and the feelings and the uncertainty, and oftentimes feeling lost. And then the growth and the progression of healing. Because my message is there is hope, there is healing, and we can all be redeemed from the things that we feel like maybe are too much. Because once we get to the other side of that, especially when you don't have to do it alone, like to your point, Michael, like there's always somebody who's willing to listen, somebody who's willing to help. Like there's so much power in people. And in this journey, I'm learning that more and more, there's this whole group of people who are like waiting for you and cheering you on that you don't even know yet. They just want to see you win. They want to see you kill it. They want to see you be that true person that they know you are. And we just have to start peeling it back and figure out who we are.
Yeah, so for the people watching this, I just want them to be aware that when Jake went, it was the early push, and just how there was nothing really established out there in the Middle East while they went out and started, planting roots and whatnot. When they came back, there was also nothing for them here, in those terms of recovery and helping them actually, bring themselves back from that combat zone. What I want to ask is kind of going back to your 30 days of gratitude, because I know you're doing that to change other people's life, but it's also, for yourself. Was there any, out of those 30 days, was there any particular day that kind of you would highlight that kind of you saw your biggest improvement or biggest kind of like eureka moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to pull it up because, I have them chronological on Instagram. So I just want to look because it's the day that focuses on avoiding negative news and media. And when I was recording that day, so I was thinking about the message that I wanted to share, because I mean, we see it all around us. I mean, you guys even reference Palestine and Israel. Like, that's just a terrible situation for everybody involved. And I think about the times where I've been sucked into, like, seemingly the world is on fire, everything's falling down around me, and it's really hard to have hope in those moments. And I felt very strongly, very compelled that, okay, yeah, let's talk about this. Let's have gratitude and let's avoid and abstain from negative media sources from a time if you can. And then the prompting came was, but talk about the other news. And so it was, in other news, you know, people were healed from cancer today. In other news, relationships were mended. And in other news, people found their voice and their calling and they stepped into that power. You know, in other news, people did something kind for somebody else. And it's just like, it's really about how we frame it. And that video, you know, I was almost done with the 30 days, but I got emotional with that video because it was just like, that's true. You know, that's real. And it's just like, we live in this world that has so much abundance and ability for to live in that energy. But I think how often in my own life I've willingly kind of given away my agency or my choice and just get sucked into something else, you know. And they're both magnetic. Like the negativity and all the things that we see around us, they feed off each other, and that just brings more and more and more. But conversely, the positive and the gratitude side of it, like, it's also magnetic, and it has a power that I think, like, when we tap into it, we can elevate and move above our old selves and the things that maybe we recognize we want to change about ourselves, but maybe don't know how. And so for that day specifically, I can't think of the day it is. I know it's late 20s, but it was gratitude and avoiding and abstaining from negative media, and then just flipping the coin and going, but in other news, all these great things happen today.
I'm going to have to comb through that content, but one of our listeners submitted a question, and they asked, who's your favorite sister?
I'm going to have to go with Natalie.
All right, listeners, you heard it, Natalie.
So, Jake, what do you hope your readers take from your book once you get it out there?
My biggest hope, my biggest takeaway is that it opens up at least conversation. Maybe it disarms and lets people drop walls so they're willing to take that next step, whether it's, hey, let me start exploring what's going on in my life, the things that I'm holding on to that maybe anchor me because I feel like it's safety, but it's actually holding me back from what I really could be doing in my life. Taking that next step to maybe seek counseling or therapy, or even just making that directional shift towards healing. And it can look different for all of us, but that's my ultimate goal. Like, I recognize not everybody's going to have been to combat. Not the point. I only tell the stories in those spaces because it had a huge impact in my life. But I hope that the commonality of being mortal and recognizing that we all go through things, but we also have the ability to choose, is what I hope people will take from it.
So I really think your mission is important, the goals you're setting, and I think you're doing an excellent job so far. And I think people can really take and really learn and grow from this. But I want to know from all that you're doing now and learning and growing and evolving, how, while doing this, while writing your book and doing the 30 Days of Gratitude, how has that helped you in your role as a father and a husband?
No, I love that question. It's definitely helped me to realize that there is scarcity in life, but I can choose to be there or not. Because, you know, Jess and I have taught, like, our kids at our ages where we got one kid going here, one kid doing this, and two doing this. And so we're all over the place sometimes. And it can feel like a lot. And then that's just outside of the house. You know, we're not talking about trying to get school done or meals or, you know, filling needs of everybody, including ourselves. But in the space of, like, really being in a creator, you know, spirit, my kids have asked a lot of questions and they've been paying attention. You know, some of them have been following on Instagram. You know, they give feedback. Hey, I thought that was cool. Or, hey, have you done your post today? You know, they're asking questions. But I think for me as a dad, as a father, it's helped me to be an example of, like, you don't have to have it all figured out. I think sometimes we portray that life, before we make the next step, you got to have A, B, and C, and D identified, and then a back plan for that. And I'm learning more and more, like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, you don't have to wait, just go. and it's going to develop in front of you. And obviously that's balanced with don't be reckless. I'm not going to quit my job and, throw it all to the wind, hoping that it lines up. But, I'm seeing them embrace this space, and it's helped me to improve my communication with my kids, with my wife, Jess. I have to give a huge shout out to her, because I tell everybody that Jessica is like my curator and gatherer of all good things in my life. And she's been that way since I've known her. She's always fine. Hey, have you heard this? Hey, check this out. Look what I found on YouTube. Check out this book. And it's really brought us closer together, because now we're sharing in this growth together. And so I have big dreams, I have big hopes with these things, but I really appreciate how it's helped me to be present with my kids. And it's helped me to encourage them to look for gratitude, even in things that maybe don't feel so abundant in the moment. So it's been a really cool opportunity.
And that's amazing. Thank you for sharing, Jake. And a question before we close it out. We'd like to ask our guest this. Do you have any questions for us behind the lava?
I do. So I know you guys have been doing this for a little while. What has been the response from the Polynesian or Islander community, and then even outside of those spaces? Like, what's the feedback you guys get?
The interesting one is somebody of Italian descent. He really liked the way we talk about customs and traditions in our households growing up, and he was like, man, that was very similar to me, in my traditional Italian family, and the way they handle things with the laying on of hands. That was their form of communication rather than actual discussion and teaching verbally. But it's been cool to listen to that, and just talking to random people, like people you wouldn't think listen, that are fellow Pacific Islanders, and then like, oh man, like what you guys do. I'm like, appreciate you. Really, man, I just do this to hang with the boys. Like, I still wish we got some of the people that were here early on with us, but it's cool to see, the homies doing good.
Overall, the support has been positive. We haven't gotten much negative responses to the podcast and the content that we put out. And what I'm glad for and what I'm grateful for is it's not the content, and the podcast is not reaching only Pacific Islanders. It's reaching people outside Pacific Islander, what's the word? Diaspora, or just outside people who are not Pacific Islanders. So I'm just glad we're reaching veterans, especially we're reaching people who are going through the same problems that we're going through, especially when it comes to men's mental health. That's one of the topics that people reach out to us and say, hey, we go through the same things when it comes to fatherhood, discipline, marriage, depression, and suicide, and all these things. A lot of people can relate to the content that we're putting out. So yeah, that's how it's been. We've been recording for over a year. It's close to being 2 years. Well, it's almost February, so it's gonna be 2 years in February next year. So we're just glad that we've been able to keep this consistent and keep this going, especially with our group. Yeah, it's overall been positive, and we're just glad to be able to do this, to keep our group close, and to basically, like I said, it's a therapy for me, and I'm glad to keep in touch with the guys. So that's what I think about the podcast so far.
I love that.
So Jake, any shout outs before we close, and where people can find you?
So again, shout out to you guys. Shout out to you guys behind the lava. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to chop it up with you guys. As far as where they can find me, you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook, all with the same handle. It's at Keep Walking. There's a couple that may pop up, but you'll know me from the other ones because it's going to be a picture of the clouds with the sun pushing through. I think that has a nice analogy to it. And, shout out also, there's some other places I've been featured with Absolute Motivation on YouTube. I don't know if you guys, have a certain playlist or whatever for when you work out, but I've changed mine since finding these guys. They've given me some platforms to speak on, but Absolute Motivation has been fantastic for workouts because there's nothing but pumping you up, right? Like, they're bringing all types of speakers, everyone from James Dixon to Goggins to, Jordan Peterson and in between. There's just nothing but people talking positivity in your ear while you're hitting those reps. And it hits different for whatever reason. So if anybody wants to check them out, that's, again, Absolute Motivation on YouTube. It's a great platform. And again, I appreciate you guys. I really do. This has been cool to be able to sit and talk with you guys and, learn about you and just have this opportunity.
Yeah, we really appreciate you. Now, I think you have the personality for whatever you're doing to really grow and to bring people in. This mental health space, I want everybody to know it's not just for men, not just for veterans. The way Jake approaches it is for everyone. And I know we hear mental health so much, those type of topics, and people might roll their eyes getting tired of it, but I mean, it needs to be brought up more because it's still an issue, right? And just because you may not listen to this one person, somebody will. There's a person for everybody, somebody to gravitate to, and for the message to reach them. And I believe, Jake will reach a lot of people. So thanks for joining us, man. It's awesome to see you doing this.
Thank you.
So, thank you for tuning into this episode of Behind the Lava Lava. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow Behind the Lava Lava and leave us a review. And thank you for joining us. We hope you found this interview informative and insightful. Until next time, Tofa Soifua.